First of all, I'm Khaldun Bshara. I used to be the director of Reward Center for the years 2010 and 2020. I worked there for 30 years before I moved to Birzeit University as a teacher in anthropology in the last 5 years. My interests are restoration, heritage, space, especially the refugee camps. My PhD is on refugee camps in Palestine and around the region, but mainly in Palestine. Before I start, I should say that as a Palestinian, I stand by every oppressed person in the world, including those Canadians or Gazans or those in Jenin and Tulkarem or in Tehran and Tabriz. Silence is complicity, and I cannot accept but say that what we are witnessing these days in the name of defense is insane. Is insane, and we should be loud about it, because when we claim that we live in a post-colonial era, this is a fake claim. And anybody with power and might can destroy any other nation without blinking an eye. And so who says that France left Africa, or Britain left Palestine, or America left Vietnam? I think he is mistaken. This is just an introductory. So my presentation is, I will skip this talking point because I will start with the concept of heritage as a European construct, and then move to the Palestinian experience, and then to think loud with you about heritage in the global context. So as an architect and restorer and anthropologist, I learned about heritage in Europe, and always we coin heritage with European Renaissance, because this is the moment that there was appreciation of classic forms and the rebirth of Roman classic archaeology and the like. And we know that the Italian Renaissance, and we know what they did, the copies, the buildings that they reproduced, and so on, which echoes the Roman Empire or the classic era, which they consider the best. And of course, moving from Renaissance, we witnessed the eruption or the change that happens in the political system in Europe with the nation states, the birth of the nation states. And heritage, therefore, evolved from aesthetic and historical appropriation into a foundational metaphor upon which nations were born. And therefore, we see states building monuments, making museums, and they start collecting, institutionalizing of heritage, ministers and departments and laws, charters, and so on. This happened 18th century and 19th century. And there was, I think, as Europeans were in the middle of the evolutionary theory of Darwin, that they applied for everybody, I think. And they start to look for their roots, actually. Where is it? And they thought that their people, the civilization, is on the linear or unilinear ladder of civilization. And therefore, they were searching for their origins. Who were they before? So they start collecting, actually. Nations, if you want to be a nation, you have to be a collector. And this was the explosion of exploiting the heritage of other people, be it India or Egypt or Iraq. All our heritage, or our global South heritage, is found in the British Museum and in Berlin and in France, in the Louvre, and in other places, of course. But this is how the hobby of collecting becomes if you collect something, you own it. If you discover something, you own the history of it. You own the geography of it, and so on. And so in this process, colonialism profoundly influenced heritage discourse, marginalizing practices that deviated from established European perspective. So what they found echoes their culture and their heritage, they took it. Otherwise, they destroyed it. And therefore, the destruction and construction was going hand in hand. And in this process, even in colonial and post-colonial chiasm. There is something that I wrote about it long time ago, which this is the small sentence. Colonials want post-colonials to be pre-colonials. So even when we are decolonized, we claim that we are decolonized, the colonizers, they want us to go back to the primitive static past that we were in, which means if you like your heritage, go and take care of the cows, the cattle, go and make embroidery. You even don't need time. I will show you an example in Palestine about this. So there was something that they appreciate whatever following their aesthetics and destroyed whatever not following their aesthetics. So now this is my former title is a colonial legacy and post-colonial discourse. Post-colonial regimes often adopted European paradigms in shaping their heritage policies. And instead of emphasizing the need of contextualizing or context-specific approach. Therefore, post-colonial regimes falling in the traps of modernity, for instance, they want museums, they want something new, like cinemas even, which we can call it cultural appropriation, but also a cultural incorporation with the hegemonic discourse. So we fall in the trap that oppressed appreciate oppressors' values and forms. And therefore, we need the same. We need to do modernity. We need to do boulevards. We need to do cinemas. We need to do palaces and so on. Even we need to do police and policing and so on. So this is the complex that Fanon talks about it, or post-colonial subaltern philosophers. This is still ongoing. And if you are from Morocco, of course, Ibn Khaldun said it, الغالب والمغلوب, the oppressed and oppressor complex is continuous until the moment. And now, to show you an example in Palestine, the British mandate, which started in 1921, actually after occupation of Palestine in 1917, they start with the planning. And in 1929, they made a law of antiquity law. And this law decided on what is archaeology in Palestine or what's worth protecting in Palestine. And they defined it as anything was produced before 1700, which means that anything produced after 1700 is not worthy. And this is very tricky because I will show you in Palestine example, the Palestinian law is following the same criteria. But by the way, I will show you some examples about heritage in Palestine that we don't see the difference between Roman and Byzantium, between Byzantium and Umayyad, between Umayyad and Mamluk, between Mamluk and Ottoman, and between Ottoman and Mandate era architecture. But putting period on the heritage value means that those who were drafting the law did not care about living heritage or living people. They cared about dead heritage, archaeology, biblical story. And Palestinians fall in the trap. In 2018, we issued a law about tangible cultural heritage. And this law defined archaeology or something worthy of protection is something that was produced before 1917. And for me, as an architect who wrote extensively about this era, late Ottoman and Mandate Palestine, there was no difference between 1917 and 1918, by the way. But 1918 architecture is not protected by the law, but 1917 is protected by the law. This is like insanity, again, reproduced under the post-colonial logic. So the main deficit with this law is periodization, actually. When you put value that has to do with archaeology, anything classic is protected, anything of age is protected. But while living heritage, the things that we live every day is not protected. So the importance is becoming for the dead rather than alive, becomes more important to protect the sacred rather than the secular. And we implement a centralized policy to protect things. So we reproduced the colonial institutionalizing of heritage during the Mandate era by having a Ministry of Antiquity, which used to be the Department of Antiquity in the Mandate era. So just to let you know about the British era law, for instance, this tower, which is the Campanile of Jerusalem and Jaffa Gate, was constructed in 1905, ordered in 1901 by Sultan Abdul Hamid, the Ottoman, and it has a clock tower with 4 hours, four clocks in every side, and Charles Ashby, the first engineer in Jerusalem after the British Mandate, ordered the destruction of this monument, actually. And you see the building before 1918, and this is the gate, the Jaffa Gate after 1918. Their claim was that this architecture does not belong to the wall. So for them also, there was a concern who owns the time, actually. We have to go to the natural time rather than mechanical time. The mechanical time is European, the natural time is the primitive others. So just to give you an idea on heritage in Palestine quickly. So if I want to say that a word about this is a mosaic of diversity. So Palestine has absorbed lots of civilization, got whatever they want from it. They give some of their traditions to other civilization, and this created really a mosaic that we are proud of it. And everybody knows that the monumental buildings, usually in Jerusalem, for instance, the Dome of the Rock, but not only the Dome of the Rock or Jerusalem, but we have tens of cities in Palestine, like Nazareth, the birthplace of Christ. Also, we have Acre, the Palestinian harbor on the Mediterranean. We have Haifa, where you listen about the bombing of the Iranians of the refineries, which is to the right in this image. But this is also a harbor which was replacing Acre in some time in the history. Also Jaffa. Jaffa was the modern capital of Palestine with lots of magazines, lots of cinemas, lots of cultural institutions, lots of missionaries. And we have this prosperous trade in oranges and whatever, soap also, and olive. Gaza was one of the important cities in Palestine. It used to have wonderful architecture with all the intensity of population, with all the intensity, the small size of Gaza. They have pieces of architecture that echoes civilization that passed through Gaza. And in this architecture, we can find really noble architecture and very decorative architecture like this Mamluk building in Jerusalem by Qaitbay from 13th century. Or we have the Byzantium Church of the Nativity, the birthplace of Christ. Or we have all these wilderness monasteries in Palestine. We have, I think, more or less 7, 8 of them, which was built in the 4th century. Also, we have hundreds of villages. These villages varies in size. Some of them are small, some of them large. Some of them contain only 20 buildings. Others contain 1,000, 1,300 buildings like these villages in Palestine. Of course, the main construction material is stone, and the vaults and the domes and all these way of scaffolding. We have different villages typology, like these throne villages, where the collecting taxes for the Ottoman Empire in the 18th and 19th century, early 19th century. Also, we have villages around which cultivating activity was there for the last 4,000 years, like Batir, which was enlisted into the World Heritage Site 3-4 years ago. So this is Batir, and these terraces, the agricultural terraces, were there for the last 4,000 years. Penetrating the landscape, also some architecture which is temporary permanent, like these watchtowers, which were used for the summer times to take care of the orchards and fields, olive trees and almonds and everything. And so they collected the rubble and constructed watchtowers to be able to store the crops there and also to protect it from thieves. In Palestine, believe it or not, I think, as in the Middle East, it is a cultural landscape. We have more than 10,000 excavated, partially or totally, archaeological sites, like this site of Samaria, North Nablus, North Palestine. This is the Hadrian Temple, but also built on top of Roman remains with a large city with agora, streets, and amphitheater, and so on. And Palestinians adopted all the techniques, sometimes wood techniques from Egypt, marbling from Italy and somewhere else from Turkey, mosaic, copying in Hisham Palace, which is an Umayyad palace from the 8th century, copying decorations and techniques from the Roman and even pre-Roman Empire. Also, we have frescoes copying Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, but in different ways and different techniques. And if we want to look on images from history, we can see what Palestine looked like only 100 years ago. This is Ramallah in 1910, 1912, actually. And Palestine was built cumulatively with this kind of everybody takes share in the construction of a gendered space, a space that was divided between men and women, but women and men were sharing also the construction, and there are some activities that is pertaining to women more than the men. And even the construction was part of the landscape. The landscape is part of the village. The village is part of the landscape, like these watchtowers and olive orchards. And even our agricultural cycle was embedded also in the economy and industrial cycle. For instance, we have the most popular olive tree in the region. Palestine is known for the olive trees. And therefore, the main or the most important industry was the soap, which was exported to Egypt and elsewhere. Long time before the oranges took over in Jaffa, and because of its importance as a medicine. All these changes, all these typologies were moving forward, but very incrementally and very slowly. So we cannot observe a big divide between epochs in Palestine, between Hellenistic and Roman, between Roman and Byzantium, between Byzantium and Islamic, early Islamic, late Islamic, between late Islamic Ottoman and the Mandate era in colonial era in Palestine. But this has to change in 1948 with the Nakba. With the Nakba, we have hundreds of villages, of Palestinian villages destroyed, urban center destroyed, more than half of the population went into exile. So this is the small map which characterized the movement of Palestine from the green to the black. And even this black, the last one on the right, 2017, is not really a representation, faithful representation of the reality. Reality is much, much messy, with walls, with trenches, and even this green, which considered area A and B, I will show you in a minute, that it is really now is blackened by settlements. And even in this post-colonial era, we reproduced the colonial era, and therefore we keep ourselves occupied. And this amazing graph about the Palestinian Authority in post-Oslo era, you have a small section of this poster that I enlarged, which shows our investment in general in Palestine, our GDP, where it is invested. And you can see that even heritage and archaeology is missing. We spend more than anybody in the world on security that we don't have, while ignoring heritage that we have a lot of it. So this is like a cultural blindness in terms of investment. You invest in something that you don't have, while not investing in something you have plenty of it. And even agriculture, which used to be 30% of our GDP and 30% of our manpower, we invest only 1% of our GDP on agriculture. So this is Palestine, which is in post-colonial era, is characterized with destruction, as the image of 2002 in Nablus, but I will not show you images from Gaza because you know more than what I want to show you if I want to show you. Destruction, not only in 48, not only in 67, not only during the occupation, but also in 2002 and recently in Gaza and elsewhere in the West Bank. Expropriation, because Israel is the characteristic of a Zionist state and colonial state is to take from our heritage and reinvent it as their heritage. Not only talking about hummus and falafel, but also about architecture and heritage. Our awliya shrines become their shrines. Our mosques become their synagogues, and so on. Our trees becomes their trees. Our springs, haunted springs, becomes their Kabbalah, something like that they call it. And not only this, the destruction and expropriation, but also the confinement of Palestinians into a small territory and easily governed by the walls and the gates. And the main success of colonial era is disconnecting Palestine from the Arab world. Yeah. Before 1967, before 1948, geography was different. We were part of the Arab world, part of the Mediterranean, part of the whole region, whatever you call it, by Ottoman Empire, Roman Empire. But suddenly we are only part of our territory that was fragmented, that was also confined, that was disconnected with other places. And even in Oslo Agreement, we went through further fragmentation. Palestine areas becomes A, B, C, A under Palestinian Authority, B under collective Palestinian and Israeli Authority, and C, which is the majority of Palestine, is under Israeli control. Therefore, in Palestine, we have limited areas that created a development pressure and urban sprawl, and the land price skyrocketed, which means if you have a historic building or archaeological site on your property, you rather destroy it and build a multi-story building to be able to host your family instead of protecting your heritage. And this is the map. Recently, you see them. The reddish is the settlements, the white is military zone, and the yellow is the Palestinian villages and towns. So it is really not that green on the first map, but it is more of a black now. So heritage preservation in Palestine, there was something embedded in the law of 1929, the colonial law, is the division of tangible and intangible heritage. And I think it's like the making of the building is intangible, but the building, once it's constructed, it is tangible. Just imagine the British law managed to divide these two things. So you don't learn about the embroidery, the construction, the gendered labor, the songs, the folklore on traditions of building, how to do it, and you only care about the tangible part of the heritage. And by the way, the images sometimes relate and sometimes do not relate to the topic. For instance, the visit Palestine with the wall, it means don't visit Palestine. And the other one is, for instance, the craft of making carpet like the one in Marrakesh. So in this gloomy description of what's going on with heritage in Palestine, we could say that there is a big difference or contradicting visions between state and non-state actors. In Palestine, I think we can see the huge contrast between state-driven and community-based heritage preservation approaches, each with its challenges and opportunities. So I start to mention that the Palestinian Authority, they don't invest and they want everything centralized, but there are a strong civil society that managed to do lots of things, even to carry the burden on their shoulders, as the women and men and kids built Palestine before. So in post-Oslo era, which is, we call it post-colonial, but we know that it is not. So heritage is not a priority for the Palestinian National Authority, and this is represented in the investment or in the law or in the proceedings. Value is not well recognized that heritage is important because we have other things to do and heritage can wait. And there, of course, there is lack of human resources and knowledge about heritage. During the last century of modernization, we lost the know-how and the craft, how to do things, even how to repair a building. We lost it for concrete and imported techniques. And by the way, even if we have the law of 2018, between 1993 and 2018, we have none of legal protection for heritage. And during this era, we have the emergence of civil society initiatives. And I will show you the contradiction between the civil society as approach that I call it provincializing heritage, as a provincializing Europe, actually. Instead of talking about the law in colonial way of talking about law, let's talk about bylaws, which is more local, more decentralized. And instead of talking about aesthetic approach, that this does not belong to the walls of Jerusalem, let's talk about job creation, for instance, and I will show you some examples. And instead of in post-colonial era, they always talk about the infrastructure and modernization. Let's talk about cultural infrastructure. And instead of talking about these small units, isolated units, disconnected from each other and disconnected from our world, Arab world, or the region, let's talk about cultural clusters. And instead of talking about the values, aesthetic and historic values, let's talk about use and knowledge value. Private and public divide, let's talk about the commons, the concept of commons. And instead of building everything about free market and money exchange, let's do ONE, which is translated to reciprocity, is like bartering things instead of alienating money exchange. And instead of dealing with mega companies doing restoration projects and construction projects, let's do local economics, small shops, small contractors, small handicraft people, and so on. And instead of concentrating our forces into the urban and monumental, let's talk about even rural Palestine. Rural Palestine, where you have hundreds of villages that are not protected and not cared of. And instead of talking about this new liberal or this modern production, let's talk about knowledge production. And instead of talking about liberal and new liberal era, let's talk about private and public partnership, PPP, for instance. These are some of examples in Palestine that we initiated in Rewaq, for instance, when I was working there in 2001. Instead of asking money for people to restore buildings, which was considered luxury, by the way, and not a necessity, we start a project called Job Creation Through Restoration. So we asked money to create jobs instead of asking money to create heritage or to restore heritage. And everybody was open for us, and therefore we managed to restore more than 130 community centers in different places in Palestine, like this one palace in Jama'in, North Palestine, this St. George Monastery in Deir al-Balah in Gaza, which was converted from a monastery and a mosque, deserted of course, into a library for children, or a music center in the middle of Ramallah, teaching music for marginalized, less fortunate people, or creating a women's center in a palace near Nablus, or creating a women's center in Abwain village near Ramallah, or even what they call it kindergarten, but elderly garden. It's not kindergarten. It's for old people to stay together in the morning and then go home afternoon in Salfit, central Palestine, or this community center in Gaza, Dar es-Sakka, which was restored in 2012, destroyed recently, or Al Ghussain Gallery in the center of Gaza, which was destroyed after it has been restored. It was restored in 2023 and it was destroyed in 2023. And this is the monastery that I showed you, which becomes the kids' library and so on. During these projects, we managed to create know-how. All these vanished crafts, we managed to create them by practice. We made workshops, we trained people, we brought the elderly, we brought the scientists, blah, 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 conservators, and we educated kids and young generation how to restore heritage in Palestine. So instead of making a production, we made knowledge production during these years. In the last 20 years, we managed to produce more than 26 six books on cultural heritage in Palestine. So the heritage becomes a medium to talk about geography and techniques and about history. So we don't accept the taken for granted reality that Palestine went through. Rather, we start to reproduce books by Palestinians on Palestinian heritage. And even we did workshops. Sometimes we brought experts from Belgium, sometimes from Britain, sometimes from elderly Palestinians, do plaster, lime wash, blacksmith, carpentry, whatever it takes to restore a building, like this kind of blacksmith. Also decorating wooden roofs, which was lost. We don't know how to do it. We start to experiment, and suddenly we have some experts in Palestine who can do this kind of work now. Not only for older generation, but even for younger generation, we wanted to have this continuity, the techniques that be appreciated by young generation will be the guarantee of protection of Palestinian heritage. And even we did not stop by doing one building in a village. We start a large project which won the Aga Khan project, which is called Aga Khan Prize, which is called 50 Villages Program, where we targeted different villages in Palestine with the restoration scheme, making community centers, residential buildings, housing, I mean, infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, greenery, trees, and so on. For instance, this building in Birzeit, which won the Aga Khan, becomes a children library, and you have it in the night for events. Also, we have this a place which is surrounded by Israeli settlements near Jerusalem. You can see the settlements on top of the mountains, like this one. And then we start the reconstruction of this rubble, actually, making it, clearing it, and then introducing a garden and introducing a women's center, a library, and other stuff. So this was in one of these phases. Abween villages, which was totally destroyed, we rehabilitated into an archaeological park, just making preventive conservation and increase the readability of the structures only, not even intervening inside the buildings. Also in Kalandia village near Jerusalem, which was cut from Jerusalem, we start from that rubble, a place where people meet, and even we moved from targeting one village to target cluster of villages like the Life Jacket of Rural Jerusalem, targeting 4 villages at once. And these rubble buildings, rubble sites become defined, become women's center, children's center, job creation, cultural infrastructure, name it. And therefore, I want to end before the 40 minutes that you allowed me to talk. I talk quickly because I don't want to miss my deadlines. So I borrow this provincializing word from David Chakrabarty when he advocated for provincializing Europe. There is not one modernity. There is not one linear evolution. For me, there is no one heritage meaning, or actually heritage has never been a word used in Palestine. Heritage is imposed from colonial era. We did not construct our buildings as a museum. We did not build Palestine in one shot, like abracadabra. So whenever we had the chance to add one room, one structure, one souk, we did it. When we had the chance to add one village, we did it. When we had the chance to move from Byzantine architecture to more Ottoman or European architecture, we moved. So therefore, the claim that Palestine is static in the past is really misleading and we should overcome it. I recall, and I want everybody from you to read Murid Barghouti, I Saw Ramallah. Murid Barghouti, who became a refugee by coincidence in 1967 when he's studying in Cairo. He could not return to Palestine, and he returned in 1996, like after 30 years, 30 years. And he found his village, Der Ghassani. And he says, colonization does not want us to move forward. I wish I have the capability to take Der Ghassani in my hand and to throw it to the future. So this really, the words of Murid Barghouti captures the essence of what I'm talking about. That heritage is not what it is, but what we can do with it. Can we change the geography? Can we change the interdependency model? Can we shift paradigms by it? Can we create jobs? Can we create infrastructure, cultural infrastructure through it? So it's not the stones that matters in this field, but the intangible story around these stones. Thank you. And by the way, thanks for Dana for her introduction for my piece, actually, because I felt really when you study architecture and go to anthropology, you become somebody who does not accept terms and concepts that are not questions. A question. Thank you.